Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to a wonderful, wonderful, great presentation that we have teed up for you this morning on how to drive sustainable Microsoft Teams adoption in your organization. I am so excited to be joined by Jeremy and my wonderful partner in crime, Roy Barton. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Roxy Ndebumadu. I happen to be in our federal customer success business here at Microsoft. And really, what I focus on is moving resistant federal government agencies forward and in the context of Microsoft Teams. So, making sure that the federal government agencies who are looking to have a full collaborative solution are really looking into how can they drive Teams adoption at their organization? How is it sustainable? Are there any customizations that need to happen? Is there anything that we need to do to make sure that this product is adoptable for them? And so that's really a large part of my focus. I am joined by my technical partner, so I am very much so end user focused. So making sure that the organization understands what they need to do to make sure that this is a sustainable option for their end users. However, Roy is more technical focused, and I think I borrow a little bit of his skills every here and there, should he choose to lend them to me. Roy is very much so technical focused. I also have the pleasure of being elected in the state of Maryland, which is a huge honor of serving 68,000 people here as a councilwoman. So all things local legislation to be able to make a difference for the quality of life for my residents, I'm all about. And yes, we do use Microsoft Teams. You'll hear a little bit more about that later. So now I'm going to pass it over to Jeremy or Roy to introduce themselves as well.
I'll go first real quick.
Okay.
So I'm Jeremy Wood. I'm the Director of Policy and Planning at Millennium Challenge Corporation. For those of you who don't know, we call ourselves a corporation, but we are a federal agency. And I'm just here to talk through from the government perspective some of the things that Roxy and I put in this presentation. But I'm looking forward to hearing Roy introduce himself.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good day, everyone. My name is Roy Barton. As Roxy alluded to, I am a technical customer success manager in the Microsoft Federal CSU. I primarily focus on all things technical on the back end of Microsoft Teams, as well as the deployment of the Teams application through Microsoft Endpoint Manager, either on premises or in the cloud. Roxy?
He's not doing himself justice there, but let's just say he's like the technical SME for all things deployment on Teams. But it's okay, Roy. We'll give you that one for today. Okay, so we're going to jump into the next section and talk about what does it mean to have scenarios for your organization. Honestly, a lot of things that I see when it comes to our federal government agencies, and Roy chime in and Jeremy chime in whenever you feel like it, is that we don't have, or they don't have scenarios based off of the alignment to their mission. When you think about most of your organizations and the people that are working there and the people that will be adopting this technology, Microsoft Teams, to use it to collaborate, to use it to integrate with third-party applications, to use it for file storage or file sharing, you're thinking about people that are really aligned to a certain mission. The people that have a certain type of value that they're looking for, that they're looking to come to work, they're looking to get products that will help them align with their organization's mission to achieve their goals. So one thing that I see and one thing that I recommend is that you really have value-driven narrative talk tracks, because let's think about it from all aspects and at any level. When you think about it from the end user perspective, and that's really where I focus on, they really want to understand, is this technology going to make my life easier? The answer is yes. Microsoft Teams is going to allow you to co-author on file sharing if you're doing something in Word or if you're doing something in PowerPoint, which is huge, all in one central place. Or if you're thinking about Planner, how can I manage my tasks? Okay, that can be done right there in Microsoft Teams already in your home channel. If you're thinking about chat, oh, I really need to include somebody else in the conversation. How can I do that really quickly? Well, Microsoft Teams does that too. So when you're thinking about each different person at your organization, you want to make sure that you're aligning this to your mission and aligning this to the value and the things that they find valuable. And for most end users, that's how is this going to make my life easier for me to do my job better. But then when you think about department management and senior management, as well as your board, what is the impact that this is going to have on initiatives or performance to really increase the ROI that they're getting in return? So think about that in the aspect of what is Microsoft Teams going to do for my initiatives? Okay, so we know that you're going to be able to create team sites. We know that you're going to have basic calendar management. We know that you're going to have this central place where you can either collaborate externally or internally. That's driving your initiatives. Because depending on your organization, you all have stakeholders, no matter where they are. You have stakeholders internally and you have stakeholders externally. So really making sure that you articulate that and you communicate this and you're doing your fact finding in a way that it's basically relatable to each different type of audience and aligning to your mission in your organization is really going to be the beginning driving force of how you get this off the ground. Anyone have anything to add? Roy, Jeremy?
No, I agree completely. I think the value proposition you present drives the narrative conversation in terms of what they're going to get out of it, which is why they want to adopt it, right? So one of the big things you're going to hear theme-wise in this entire deck is the governance you set up drives the adoption you're going to expect on the other end. So you've got to really think through all those narratives up front if you want people to actually use the tool.
100%. And these are just what you're seeing here on the screen. These are just some examples of how we've done it at other organizations. Like if you take HUD in the middle, for example, HUD kind of wanted to help their field office program managers understand, okay, how does this process flow, this workflow work for you to make your life easier? So we created this quick start card for them so that they can understand, okay, what does that look like? Like, what is my day-to-day? Take me on this journey. If you look at the other two organizations on the left and the right, they did it for a compliance officer or a grants management officer because those are the prevalent roles that they have in their organization. Okay, so what are the tasks that are in Microsoft Teams that you can communicate and articulate to them so that this drives sustainable adoption at a scale that's relatable for them, that aligns with the organization's mission? So these are really key things that you should and work to develop in the very beginning. So as you're communicating this to your users, as you're articulating this to your organization, they can relate to it and they understand where you're coming from and how this aligns with the agency mission.
Totally agree. These you can take these are great PDFs. Microsoft has them as part of their adoption toolkit for Teams, and you can take them and piece them together for yourself. I was able to copy out the images and take text and create scenarios that were very, very specific to my organization that helped to drive the conversation of why you would use Teams. I think getting the why up front really makes a difference for then continuing the conversation to know the how piece.
100%, Jeremy. Okay, this is my very favorite part of the presentation because I love governance. And, as much as I'm not the expert in governance, I love governance because it really brings it home. You know what I mean? Like when you're deploying Microsoft Teams, there's a certain process, and you'll see it in when we get closer towards the presentation. There's a certain process that we like to take our customers on a journey, but governance is like number 2 on that list because you have to think about, how am I going to govern this tool so it doesn't get out of hand, so that I'm not in this mode of reaction once things start happening? Am I going to allow people to create their own team site? Am I going to allow external guest users? Am I going to allow anonymous connection? Like, you really have to set that and make those decisions up front in the aspect of, how am I going to govern this tool? What's that governance going to look like? What are some decisions that I need to make up front to make this a more seamless experience for my organization? Some of the things that Roy and I like to take our customers through is kind of like a technical checklist. Like, you know what I mean? Like, have you talked about client deployment? Have you thought about that? Okay, if you have, what does that look like? And how do we advise you for that to look seamless? Or, reviewing administration options, which is what we talked about, or assisting, with Skype to Teams transition, because for most of our customers, they're getting off of Skype and moving in the direction of Microsoft Teams. And that can be like a night and day experience for some people. So making sure that we're setting up that transition shop meeting to talk about, okay, these are the differences and this is what you need to do to kind of set this up appropriately. monitoring and reviewing technical blockers. We're always doing that constantly. Like Roy can talk to you more about that, but proactively we're always doing that, and making sure that there are no blockers that are accelerating Teams adoption. One thing that I like to point to, and I can't show you today, but if you connect with me offline, I can show you, is we have like a call quality dashboard where we kind of monitor like the experience of Microsoft Teams to make sure that customers are getting the value, that there are no blockers there, that the users in the organization are having a seamless experience, which is where we like to see it. And we have some metrics that tell us how we're trending on that, but that's something that we like to monitor. Other things that you have to think about: connectivity, split tunneling, like that's a big deal. Authentication, MFA, like that's a big deal. These compliance features, like really thinking through what does that look like for your organization. Roy, Jeremy, is there anything that you would add there? Because this is more your area than mine.
Yeah, so on the area of governance, one of the things I want to back up to is that you mentioned it was, second on the list, and we do that for a very specific reason. When you're considering the deployment of Teams, especially to a pilot group of users, you really want to monitor how those users start using the Teams platform. And by that, what we ask from the Microsoft side is, watch how they're creating teams, watch how they use Teams, give them some guidance on what they should do with the tool, and then build your governance policies around that. You should always take the security of your data very seriously, but when it comes to Teams and internal to your organization, a lot of times customers want to instantly lock down the platform and then slowly give out permissions, where we've seen more success in adoption of the tool when you're slightly slack on your governance stance, and then figure out what areas actually need to be implemented to hone the tool in to the way your organization is going to use it.
It's a really, really good point, Roy. That's a really, really good point. I'm glad that you hit on that. So the next section we're going to go into is, how do you inform people that change is coming? And before we kind of tell you how you do that, we're going to talk about some of the challenges, because there are a lot of challenges that might come about. When you think about small scale organizations versus large scale organizations, the challenges are going to be a bit different. From the aspect of large scale organizations, I'll talk to you a little bit more about that, because I've had a lot of experience working with larger organizations. You're thinking about, executive sponsorships. Like, do you have that? Are they engaged? Sometimes when you're thinking about bigger organizations, the executive sponsor is not really fully always engaged. And sometimes they are. It really just depends on the organization and how they have their IT shop set up. However, that can sometimes be super hindering because of the simple fact that the executive sponsor is what drives that excitement. It's what drives people to the platform to know, like, okay, my executive sponsor is bought in, so this is the level of bought in that I need to be. If you have all of your, I guess you would say, from the top down pushing this change, it's a lot easier because your users will now see the commitment and the dedication to this platform, and it making their lives easier. When you think about like different scales or like training scales, what does that look like? At some large scale organization, it's easier to do them division by division, with a separate focus on leadership. With a lot of the organizations that I cover, we've done them separately. We've done them division by division. So like OCIO will do their own types of training up front, because there are different types of training. You have end user focused training, and then you have also training for the more technical audience. And I really want to highlight that, because a lot of people, I think they try to do a one size fits all training. That doesn't work. So having an end user training and a more technical type of training for your technical audience is really important. But we've done that by different divisions. So human resources will have their own type of training, because that way you can customize it to their specific experience. The way that human resources uses it versus a grants office is going to be completely different on how they use Teams. So making sure that you separate those trainings are some of the things that we've kind of seen up front at our larger scale organizations that are a little bit more helpful, as well as like with your leadership. And when you think about leadership, you're talking about your appointed officials, your secretary, cabinet type officials, your commissioners, those type of people. Doing their training separately is a huge help. Some of the more difficulties is that, it's harder to pin down certain scenarios. It's harder to get to the meat and understand what we're solving for, because it's just bigger. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of bureaucracy. There's a lot of big picture that sometimes gets missed along the way, that doesn't get realized until closer towards the end. And so with large scale organization, it's really important to understand, like, there are a number of challenges that they face, and it's not easy, especially when you're thinking about sometimes configuration with larger scale organizations being contracted out to, outside contractors. Sometimes it's really not easy, but understanding those challenges up front will really give you that path forward on, okay, what's the best way, given this organization, given some of the things that we know to be challenges or reoccurring challenges, how do we best tackle this scenario up front to develop a path through? And I'll let Jeremy, if you want to chime in, or Roy, if you've seen anything different with the smaller organizations, because I know, Jeremy, you are at a smaller organization.
We are a smaller organization, and by smaller we mean 8 federal staff, and everything is done by outsourced contractors. And so, absolutely, these are something that small agencies need to think about. Small agencies don't have the resources, and so you're doing it with what you have. And so, as you consider, the governance you're going to put into place, don't want to put something in place you can't manage within the staff level you have. And so, we're just kind of highlighting these challenges, and it's a very, consistent message through the small organization challenge, which is if you don't have the staff, don't impose things that are going to cause, the extra burden on you for no good reason, right? A lot of agencies have very strict processes, very strict considerations. I like what Roy said. A lot of agencies will take the approach of lock it down completely and then slowly unlock it. And I would tell you, at a small agency, our success has been more along the lines of what Roy mentioned, which is to the greatest extent possible, provide freedom. And then as we understand better how people are going to use the tool, we can then tailor our governance and tailor our settings to allow for that, and in a way that is beneficial to the agency, but also provides us the security we need.
It's a really, really great point. So the change commitment curve has been a very big one for us, because it's something that I developed earlier, about 2 years ago, to really take customers on a journey of, like, how do you really get to that end state that you're trying to get to, starting with change management, and how important it is to really define those key scenarios, to really have those key things, those pinpointed areas of change up front, so that you know where you're going. So really having those workshops, or really, getting to the meat of that value discovery to understand where are we trying to go. That's a really big deal of change management, because only then will you uncover, okay, maybe I need to customize this. Like, maybe I need to think more about line of business applications, because that's more applicable to my organization. I know for me specifically, I'm aligned to a lot of legislative type of customers, and Teams out of the box doesn't always work to fit their needs. So how do we think more about line of business applications up front to make sure that once this product is rolled out completely, it's sustainable because it meets the needs of the organization? Another big thing that a lot of people don't talk about are champion programs. Like, really making sure that you build that champion community inside of your organization. And we've seen it at a couple of our customers. We have a ton of customers who will along the journey develop a champions group. And champions groups can be done in a number of different ways. You can have people that are nominated by their leadership chain. You can have people that are just power users that, most users in your organizations tend to gravitate to ask questions. You can have somebody that's more influential that people tend to listen to, or people tend to be curious about how they're doing their job. There are a number of different ways, but making sure that you provide that group, that program, so that they have a space to learn, train the trainer, ask questions, so they can also laterally drive your adoption at levels where you may not always be able to. So that's important in the change management aspect up front. Then that's when Roy talked about the governance piece, really focusing on that transition, that governance, like, how are you going to lock this down, naming convention, network, making sure the network is in the state that you want it to be to make you successful, desktop deployment. Like, what does all of that look like? Like, what is this timeline that we're looking at from a deployment perspective, and really making sure that that's there? Then you get to the communications aspect of it, where you're articulating to your users the change that's coming. And how you do that happens in different ways. Microsoft has a number of different templates that have already been pre-customized for government, where you can take those templates, just replace them with your logo, your verbiage, totally customizable, replace them with your verbiage, and then just kind of plug and play and send those mass emails out to your organization to let them know about the change that's coming. So then you get to that communications aspect and make sure that you're driving awareness, because what you don't want to do is wait till the day of deployment and it shows up on my PC and I just click X because you didn't tell me what was coming and I have no idea what this is, you know? So really making sure you're focusing on that communication. And then the last aspect of the journey comes along, which is education. When you think about learning management portals, training, what does that look like? Are you going to leverage some of the Microsoft resources, or are you going to bring in a partner to do training at larger scales? Are you going to do brown bags, customized type of content, learning management portals, which are a big one, so that users can consume at their own rate? And that really comes with knowing your organization and understanding what's best for you. So this is the kind of journey that we really like to take our customers on and really partner with them together to be able to make sure that we're hitting all aspects of this deployment to make sure that it is sustainable. Chance, did I miss anything?
I don't think so. And we'll definitely talk more about Champions Program and learning portals in some future slides as well.
Yeah, Roxy, the only thing I would add there is, when we think about communications, and if you're an IT professional, a lot of times we in the IT world don't really communicate that well. And some of the most successful deployments that I've seen has been IT departments that almost over communicate. They're completely transparent with their end users. And really the IT department is helping drive the adoption and the change. They're generating the awareness. So if you're in an IT department, over communicate, let them know, help get your user base excited about the platform that is Teams, because it's going to simplify your work processes and it's going to simplify their work processes as well.
100% agree with you, Roy. You're tracking, and then that kind of goes into this sponsorship model, because communication and your executive sponsor, they go hand in hand. So in this kind of image, you kind of see the transition, or the kind of the communications journey that we like to go on, which starts with the OCIO. I mean, it does, because OCIO is the one that owns the product, right? So it starts with OCIO, and that goes to senior leadership, whoever that is in your organization. That might be your CIO's peers, making sure that it's communicated to them like, hey, this is a change that's coming in your department. Then moving on to the IT director, making sure that they understand this is the change that's coming org-wide. Now, assuming that they might already know, but in some organization, you'd be surprised, they don't. So communicating that to the IT director so that as these influx of questions start to come in, they're prepared to answer that. In an ideal world, it goes then to the office of the secretary, in an ideal world, and making sure that if you do have a secretary or the person that's leading your organization, that email communications of this change can come from them, because they are usually the most recognized person in the organization, usually. However, for your organization, that might look different. You might have somebody else that's well known and well recognized and well admired and well followed, that communication might be better off coming from that person. At the end of the day, what we recommend and what we've seen success with is that the email of the broader announcement, yes, come from OCIO, as well as somebody else who is more neutral, that is not from IT, that is more admired, more of a figurehead for the organization, where people are very familiar. And if that email does come out, they are automatically guaranteed to go look at it, read it in to its entirety, and be excited that this person is championing something like this. What we recommend in terms of the executive sponsor kind of communication scale. Awesome. So now you got teams going, you got your governance going, you got your executive sponsor, you got your communications, all your IT needs have been met. Okay, what does your 30, 60, 90-day plan look like? This is my favorite one. Because it's so important for you to have. It's so important for you to have a clear plan so that you can understand what you're tracking against on your side. So, I mean, pushing it out and just deploying teams is just the beginning. Now, this is where the work comes in, making sure that you have that plan. So in the first 30 days, we always recommend that Champions Network. It's so, so, so huge in terms of identifying your champions, training them, like that train the trainer model, training them on different parts of Microsoft Teams. Maybe that is apps, maybe that is bots, maybe that is just the different plugins like Microsoft Forms or Microsoft Planner, Microsoft PowerPoint, all the different tabs that you can add in. Maybe it's just training them on that, identifying different resources to share with them so that they can share out with their broader community, so that they can have training sessions on their own and really facilitate and help you in that aspect. Because this shouldn't be something that you carry and do all on your own. This is something that you should scale throughout your organization. That's really important. Your communications plan, we talked about that. It's really important identifying your audience and really understanding how you're going to communicate the change, because that's how you sustain the change. It starts with that awareness. I've seen a ton of organizations do this one thing, and I hope you don't do it. Do this one thing where they just send an email out from OCIO saying that Teams is coming. And the reality is sometimes OCIO doesn't have a lot of clicks. People don't really read their emails. I'm sorry to say, but it's just the reality of most organizations. So please don't make that mistake, because usually what happens is once they do make that mistake, they're wondering why no one's using the product. It's because they don't really know about it and they didn't open the email and they probably just pressed delete. So that's some of the realities that we see. The training plan we've talked about, really understanding, am I going to go with learning pathways? Do I need something from my users to kind of consume this at their own pace? Or do I want something that's a little bit more out there, that's guided training where I have a facilitator and things like that? So really figuring that out. Then you're getting into the 60-day plan. Hopefully by this point, you're really up and running, you're flowing, you've got a steady pace, you're rocking with it. You have your champions leading information sessions or brown bags and things like that. You have monthly learnings with your end users, whether that's by division or by department. You have learning paths and quick help type cards that you've created that help the organization, that if a user just wants to really take a deep dive or a digest of Teams, you have a quick card that's already out there that they can just consume at their own pace. Then you're getting into your 90-day plan, really understanding, okay, what are my focus groups? How can I gather the lessons learned from those focus groups that are across the business and get those best practices so that we can amplify them? How do I share success stories across department so that it creates a certain level of awareness and excitement? Because if you're doing something in HR and you did something really successful or something great with Teams, I want to know about that in finance. I want to know about that, because that also gives me some motivation on ways that I can tackle my business differently. So I really want to learn about that, and really, of course, always being up to date on your usage and understanding where are you trending in the organization. Are people actually using this? How are they using it? Is it the desktop? Are they using it on MacBooks? Are they using it on their phones, on the mobile device? Like, how are they using it so that you can better track insights? Roy, anything I missed?
No,
Okay.
I think you hit the nail on the head there.
Thank you.
And I would say if you don't plan, you're going to end up doing this stuff anyway. You're just going to be doing it, trying to catch up.
Yeah. So good point. Such a good point.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about things that we recommend all agencies do. So this is definitely coming from a governmental perspective. So quickly, you've heard us mention it a number of times, a champions program. So if you're not familiar with that concept, basically it's finding people within your organization who have a passion for the product, who you included in possibly a pilot early on. So they were participants and they know the tool, they know some of its capabilities, they know why we want to drive people to use it, how it's going to change our organization, and you add them to your own internal champions program. Now, in addition to this, Microsoft has its own champions program as well that you can participate in, and that's something we highly recommend because through their champions program, you get access to a lot of materials that you can use to manage your own, help you to drive adoption and drive communications. They give you pretty much everything you need to get it done. So our champions program, we meet monthly. We have a special team just for our champions program where we share things in advance that are coming out, new features that are going to be in the government cloud for Microsoft Teams. And to be honest, we're running a champions program where we have a champions for all sorts of different products, whether it's Microsoft Forms, Microsoft Teams, Power Automate, whatever it is, we have a champions team for it, because not everybody's going to resonate with every application, every tool. The other thing we really want to push and recommend is the Microsoft Tech Community. If you haven't accessed it, the public sector portion of the tech community is phenomenal. They've been doing a great job at putting out monthly updates on what's new in the government clouds. They're really good at talking about some of the challenges and the things that are unique to the government cloud. And there's also a way for you to engage in that community and to post your questions and post your responses to other people's questions. And so we really want to recommend that this is a place for you to go to get answers when you don't know the answers. And then finally, we've mentioned a couple times the learning pathways. So learning pathways is a pattern practices to deploy in your own environment. You can do it without Microsoft, right? You download it and then you can deploy it yourself into your environment. But what it does is it exposes to your user base training that Microsoft has around a whole slew of products, Microsoft Teams being one of them. And you can then go forth and even customize the playlist and make it specific to your organization, which is something we did. We created user scenarios up front using the same value propositions we talked about earlier. And from those user scenarios, we developed scenario playlists to help somebody answer very specific questions on why would I do this for Teams, or I'm trying to do this sort of thing, and what's the process to do that. And so Learning Pathway has been very, very powerful tool in our agency for education. And we'll put links at the end of this session. I'll bring out some links and post them in the chat for those who are interested. So transitioning into lessons learned, this is something we always talk about amongst agencies, right? Trying to learn from other people's mistakes. And so Roxy and I have collected a few of those things over time. I'll share quickly. The Department of State has done a massive deployment of Microsoft Teams. And they, through our interactions with them, they shared with us some things not to do and some things to do, but mostly on the things to do, they've really gone down a path of a coach and player model, which I thought was very interesting. So, Microsoft groups have been around for a while, and Teams just kind of sits on top of that. And they took an approach where if you created a group or you created a team, you were the coach for that team. And individuals need to go to the team owner before they go to IT support for assistance. And that really drives home the fact that every team is going to function differently. The reason you have channels is going to be different. How you communicate, what your norms for how your team interacts and where you post content are going to be different. And really the owners of the team are going to be the person who can best answer those questions. IT isn't really going to understand why they did something, why they have a certain channel and why it exists. And so that's just one aspect I thought was very interesting in trying to drive a support model, which moved away from IT because really IT wasn't going to have the answer to that question. Any other lessons learned you want to share real quick, Roxy?
I think you hit those out the park. Like, honestly, it's really making sure that you're really including all of the other departments that you have and all the other organizations that you have under your organization, and not just leaving this with IT. It's an inclusive process that needs to include a lot of people for it to be scalable and for it to be sustainable. So I think it's just really making sure, and I know that sounds like hitting on a point, but it's really, really important that you include other parts of the business outside of IT. It's really, really important. I'll ask Roy if he has any lessons learned, because he's worked with a ton of customers as well.
Yeah, the biggest thing I'll say here is if you're managing the help desk, or if you're an IT professional, embrace the Champions program, because they are an extension of really your right and left arm. They're not intended to be technical SMEs. They're not there to answer questions about Teams global policies, but what they are feature functional SMEs, so they understand how the tool works. And having people that your customers can go to and get some of those more simplistic questions answered at your disposal is invaluable and will save you tons and tons of time in processing tickets. So really embrace your Champions network.
That's great. I think another thing that I think worked for our agency is we posted quick videos using Microsoft Stream. So those who haven't used Stream, you can create quick 15-minute videos that you record right from the web browser. And so we created ones on like how to create a meeting, how to create a team, how to create channels. And so those are heavily utilized resources that we put in place. Another thing we did is we put in place a team called Teams Learning and Support. And then it's an open team, anybody can join, it's public. But in that team, we have channels for tips and tricks, ask me anything, announcements on new features that are coming. And we really drive people to join that team to get the latest information and also to ask us questions around the challenges they may be having or things they may want to they're trying to figure out how to do. You know, for many of our users, we're moving from a Skype world. And so a lot of their questions are on what do I do? I used to do this in Skype. How do I do that in Teams? Or, some of those more esoteric things of why do I do that? And then things that I've heard from other organizations as to things they would do differently. So one feedback we received was that they wish they had hosted more seminars. So consider that as you do your governance plan and your rollout plan. Consider how you want to do those kind of in-person webinar type interactions. Another thing that was suggested was office hours, have a set time people could drop in just to ask questions. We've done that for a number of past deployments from our organization. We didn't do that with Teams specifically, but we have found that it's very useful for other things. And then, of course, we mentioned multiple times, and we're going to keep driving it home, the Champions Program. If the Champions Program becomes your unofficial support network, where people can say, reach out to somebody who is a declared champion, and we have them in every. We ensured we got one in every department of our organization. They could reach out and say, hey, I'm trying to do XYZ. I don't know how to do it. Can you help me? And we empower those champions by providing them access to all the training links and how to direct people to the right information. But most importantly, how they interact with them is around what have they done in Teams and how it's worked for them. And we found that to be very powerful.
I love it. Now, what does success look like? I mean, we've talked about lessons learned, the challenges. Now let's talk about what does success look like. I'll speak to two in particular, and I'll let these gentlemen speak to the other one. With the city of Bowie, now I'm speaking as a representative of the city of Bowie and not as Microsoft, so I want to make sure I clarify that. We've been holding all of our council hearings on Teams, and it's been fantastic. It's been phenomenal. It's been a way for us to really, truly learn how to pivot, conduct votes, and have remote hearings in a way that we actually probably would have never done or have never experienced before. This is like the first time in history where we've done something like this and done something quickly. And you can see there on the picture, myself as well as my other colleagues that sit on the council having a very thought-provoking discussion about something that was going on for that particular agenda item. So that's been a way of us being, that's been another way that a lot of legislative bodies have been able to be successful, have these hearings, take the community with them along on this journey of transparency, fairness, inclusion, and making sure that they're able to still feel and know that they can participate, even though that we aren't in an in-person setting. And one thing I will say, it's actually been even better, and Roy can speak to his school board, because the school board has been doing this in their area. It's even better because I don't know about in your areas, but in my area, we do have a room capacity limit. So even if we were in person and let's say this had never happened, we have a capacity where we can only have or accept 80 people in the room. So this has built up the opportunity for people to participate at scales that we've just never had before, because that just wasn't our setting, that wasn't our norm. And this has brought about new norms for us that have taught us to be more inclusive towards all of our audiences, and all of our different types of residents. So it's been fantastic. When you think about housing and urban development, they've just been wildly amazing in what they've been able to do with collaboration in a remote setting. You're thinking about an organization that really focuses on fairness in the housing sector and making sure that there is inclusiveness, that everybody who needs housing is able to get it. Everybody who wants to own a home is able to do that. And the way that this organization has been able to leverage Microsoft Teams to keep their organization and environment continuously running in a manner that where their customers have seen no interruption or no lack in coverage or lack in service, because they've been able to do different things through Teams, and even automate some processes so they're not so redundant and they're not so tedious, so that their users can focus on other things that will make them more successful, and we can automate some of the stuff that we're taking a little bit too much time. So those are some of the successes that we've seen that have been great. Housing and Urban Development really followed that process, that change curve that we showed you and talked about, did a fantastic job with their communications. And I even remember being there that morning, their users were walking up and were like, oh my gosh, we saw this on TV last night. You mean to tell me the federal government is getting this? Like, oh my goodness, like my job is about to be made so much easier. And that was heartwarming, of course, I won't cry. But it was just an amazing thing to see how excited people were because we did that awareness, because we had that stakeholdership across the board where everybody was able to participate in this sustainable adoption. So I'll tell you about those, and then I'll let Roy tell you about the DoD CVR that you've all read about in the news and what they were able to do with that success.
Yeah, thanks, Roxy. So the CVR is impressive in and of itself because at the start of the pandemic and when people were starting to be sent home, the DoD had to come up with a way to quickly get it to where everyone within the DoD could communicate essentially the same way that they did when they were in the office. And their answer to that was the deployment of Microsoft Teams and the creation of over 4 million accounts for all of their users so that they could take advantage of a singular platform. To date, the DoD CVR is the largest instantiation of Microsoft Teams on the planet, and it is currently the most heavily used. And I'm sorry, I'm just trying to think. The DoD has been so ecstatic with this that they've extended out their contract with us twice, and we're not sure how much longer it's going to stick around, but it is absolutely phenomenal to see the level of use and the amount of collaboration that's going on within that tenant. A lot of the changes that are being driven on the platform today are based off of recommendations from our DoD counterpart in the CVR because they see the use case and the value of the tool, and they're helping and working with us collaboratively to make the tool better. On the flip side of that, at the start of the pandemic, I reached out to my school district and asked them what they were going to do for their remote learning when school started back, and they had absolutely no clue. So I went and volunteered with them for a couple of hours, and that night they had a board meeting. And after about 8 hours of on-site training, hardware preparation, and getting the boardroom set up, they hosted their very first Microsoft Teams live event and had a public-facing board meeting on the Teams platform ever. And it was wildly successful. And since then, I've worked with them to get their school database synced with that. And now they're running all of their classrooms across the entire school district solely through Microsoft Teams. They still host their school board meetings twice a month through Teams live events, and they're super happy with the platform.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. And I would say even my own agency, it's not on the slide because we created the slide quite some time ago. My own agency's had significant success with our rollout, and our adoption rates are just through the roof. And the engagement we've had with people are solving larger problems than just Teams and communication. Now they're finally talking about, well, where should we be storing our content, and how does that apply when it comes to records management? So, as a federal agency, you have lots of requirements, not just around helping people do meetings and communications, but also around just knowledge management in general, right? How to refine content, make sure it's not lost, make sure you can leverage it for decision making, but then also how do you retain that for your responsibilities when it comes to records and in all of those aspects. And so just Teams has driven my agency forward in many ways into making sure we, tackle those tough conversations and then have great success in terms of how we're now capturing those things. But that brings us to the end of our presentation for the day. And so I'm going to stop presenting.
Yes. And
any questions? This is an opportunity for questions. Andrew or David?
No questions from my end. Thanks for sharing those success stories at the end. That was really cool to hear everything, both really mixed of both professional with your work life, but then also some professional ones in your personal. Thanks for sharing this.
Thank you.
Yep, I'm sharing the links to the tech community and to the Champions program, and then also to, let's see here, Learning Pathways that I mentioned I would share during the presentation.
That's fabulous.
So this is David Presidio. We're standing up a GCC High 365 environment pretty soon, and I learned a lot for the presentation. Thank you very much to all the presenters. Do you have any tips on, obviously we're going to store some CUI in it, any tips on just keeping CUI and keeping employees from making, I guess my biggest thing is keeping employees from making mistakes like accidentally sending CUI to someone on email that doesn't need it?
Yeah, so on that, I would look, do you know what your license SKU is? Are you going to be G3 or G5?
I believe we're GCC High, which I think is 3.
Okay, so I would look at a couple of different things. Number one would be DLP if you're licensed for data loss protection. And then I would also look at Azure information protection policies with labeling. That way you can help encrypt that data regardless of where it goes. So even if you send it to a Gmail account, right, that data is protected, and it can't be forwarded from that point on back and forth outside of it. On the governance and the protection of the data, to I think you're talking there's an app in the Air Force that they use, and I can't think of what it is. It's for protecting PII. But basically you're wanting something to scan, maybe an email or a document, to make sure that it doesn't contain things that need to go outside of the organization. And that's where data loss protection and Azure information protection would come in.
Yeah, David, I think what you're going to find is it's tough no matter what organization you're in, whether it's GCC High or not. My agency's not in GCC High, we're in regular GCC. We have the same question. Teams makes it a little more complicated. We previously in groups would have a red banner on our group pages if the site itself contains CUI in any form or fashion. But those types of things aren't visible within Teams itself, so it just makes it a little more complicated. But DLP is definitely the way to go.
And all of those transactions between users are definitely visible within the Security and Compliance Center and audit logs, so you can track that.
Okay,
Eventually we'll get sensitivity labels. Watch for that. Eventually sensitivity labels will be helpful.
The sensitivity labels will be in email or built into the documents in Microsoft Word, or how will that work?
Yeah, that's part of Azure information protection. And with G3, you get the standard labels, and with G5 licensing, you get customized labels. But that's where AIP comes into play.
Yeah, it'll let you mark something. Even in G3, using the standard labels, you can just come up with a norm that says this is a label that we're using for this type of content. And then it will apply the restrictions, as Roy was talking about.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? I know it's a small group today. Roxy, you have a question?
I don't have any questions. I think I love small groups. I think this is phenomenal, and Teams is really doing some groundbreaking things. And I think what I urge people to think about all the time, it's not about Teams versus Zoom versus this person versus that person. It's more so about the collaboration aspect of it, the entire platform and all that it enables your users to be able to do so that they can really accomplish the things that they need to accomplish to make their lives easier. And that's what I urge people to think about. So I think it's fantastic to see so many organizations get on Teams so quickly, especially in the times that we're represented. And I don't think that we'll ever go back to the day where everything is solely office based, and this enhanced collaboration that we're seeing with like kind of like this remote hybrid situation is ever going to be the same. So I just know that the future is bright for a lot of organizations who are using Teams. I mean, last week we announced 115 million daily active users, which is huge. So it's just really exciting to see the future and how collaboration is coming together, and how automation with the bots and with the third-party applications are really expediting some of those workflows to make users a little bit more productive. That's awesome to see.
Awesome. Well, I guess we'll end this meeting for today. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Roxy. Thank you, Roy, for your contributions and for the information you shared today.
Thank you.
Thank you.